How can we integrate the goals from our accessibility policy within our departmental processes? We're aiming to spread the responsibility and ensure that accessibility is considered as an integral part of day-to-day activity. Considering the cost of bugs, the sooner we find them, the less they cost to fix, and this is no different for accessibility issues. So the sooner we consider accessibility within our IT process, the better. Shifting left means testing earlier within our IT development lifecycle, and this can be applied to accessibility as well. So testing for accessibility, considering accessibility when building, designing, and gathering requirements, and adding accessibility gateways within our change and release process. In other words, if we say only release when it's accessible, or at least assign responsibility and make a plan for resolving accessibility defects, include accessibility within requirements and testing, then the teams who design and build new solutions know that accessibility is expected. There are many possible options already in use in the field. Let's start by looking at building new sites and services. Free accessibility linters can be added to interactive development environments that add a kind of accessibility spell check for developers. Where frameworks are used, the accessibility of their native elements, such as colors, can be verified. Here, for example, are the default colors used by Bootstrap, some of which have insufficient contrast. Linter will automatically request changes to resolve common issues from pull requests in Github. Automated accessibility testing can be included in continuous integration practices. There's an excellent demonstration of this by Mark Stedman from DQ, available to learn more from on YouTube. And behavior-driven development is often used to document and design a deliverable around a behavior that a user anticipates. And a method often used for this is Gherkin. Gherkin is a business-readable language which helps to describe business behavior without going into technical implementation details. Writing accessibility requirements as Gherkin tests is an effective way to make accessibility expectations explicit. This leads us into areas to consider when designing. For our services to be accessible by design, it's important to involve users with disabilities and impairments in the process. Within a university, you're likely to have both student and staff groups who would be happy to be involved, but it's important to recognize their contribution and time, particularly for testing. An interesting example at the University of York is a group of student screen reader testers. In her presentation, Auditing Design Systems for Accessibility, Anna Cook shares how the principles set out by Brad Frost in his book Atomic Design can help us to review our design elements for accessibility. Every university is likely to have a brand with colors, fonts, and other design tokens that web developers use when building atoms such as drop-downs and buttons, which are then put together as components or molecules and organisms, which are then applied into templates and pages. The accessibility of these can be tested and remediations made so that a component library can be built up. For example, when you know all of the color combinations in your brand that have sufficient contrast, you know these are now your available options and you can discard the others. These practices help us to ensure accessibility is built into our components. It does not remove the need for accessibility testing, but should mean that simple aspects like forms and colors are no longer frequent accessibility issues. At the wireframe stage, it's recommended to include design intent so that developers don't have to second guess how a design is meant to be accessible. Sarah Polis and Claire Weber of Intopia have shared their accessibility annotation library for use in Figma. In this example, headings, tabs, and reading orders have been annotated. Thinking about requirements, we can add accessibility within project documentation, for example, requiring creation of accessibility statements, and we could include accessibility within the definition of done. And on the support site, we've shared a role-based example of this. On screen, our example is for a content creator and a developer. For commercial solutions, we can require an accessibility conformance report, an accessibility roadmap. We can lobby our vendors to prioritize accessibility and include accessibility within non-functional requirements. Thinking about our change and release process, we can require accessibility statements to be published or updated as part of Go Live for new services or change approval for a significant upgrade. And we could set automated reminders for when accessibility statements should be reviewed and updated. We could include a section for accessibility testing within our request for change forms, as well as an entry for noting whether an update to the accessibility statement will be required. Continuing from our point earlier, we can use automated tools to scan our sites for accessibility. There are examples online of using this data to populate dashboards. While the graphic I've been using is presented more of a waterfall format, this is just as applicable in Agile. In the full slide deck, I've added sections from the Agile Manifesto and how they can be related to accessibility. But to show you one today, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done is always an attractive proposition. On screen is HTML and JavaScript to create a button. On the right, the semantic button element is used, but on the left, the same is achieved without using semantic elements, but much more effort is required to make this button keyboard accessible, as you can see from the extra JavaScript. And you can view this demo for yourself on CodePen.